Art has for thousands of years been a powerful way of convening meaning, provoking thought, and displaying aesthetically pleasing imagery. There are many artists who adhere to conventional styles, but it's the ones who develop new techniques and approaches that are subjectively the most intriguing. From fully immersive experiences to surprisingly simple yet effective designs, these are 15 creative works of art from around the world. Number 15. Infinity Rooms. Yayoi Kusama is a Japanese artist who works across many different fields such as sculpture, painting, film, and fashion. But it's her installation art that she'll be most remembered for. Classically trained but hugely influenced by abstract impressionism and pop art, she first rose to public recognition in the 60s when she organized events where she'd paint naked participants with polka dots. At the same time, she had also begun to experiment with the use of mirrors in her installations, and this fascination has been an important part of the development of a range of infinity rooms that can now be found in galleries around the world. The concept is quite simple, but the results are stunning, and people travel far and wide to get a chance to experience them for themselves. The rooms are covered in a series of mirrors that give the illusion that they're going on forever. And within them, Kusama places a number of brightly colored objects, usually ones that are covered in her favorite polka dot design. From ones that feel almost spiritual and magical to those that act as commentaries on modern life, no two infinity rooms are alike, but each forces visitors to take a moment of contemplation to take in the beauty around them. While they may look amazing, pictures of these rooms really don't do them any justice, and it's only by fully immersing yourself in one that you truly appreciate the full effect. Number 14. Guernica. Pablo Picasso is, of course, one of the most famous artists who have ever lived. Born in Spain and one of the main visionaries behind the Surrealist and Cubist movement, he created hundreds of works that have only gone on to become even more valued as time passes. But possibly the most powerful of them all was a piece called Guernica, which he painted at his home in Paris in April of 1937. This was a time when the Nazi war machine was beginning to move across Europe, and the painting itself is widely regarded as one of the most moving anti-war paintings ever created. It was in response to the bombing of the northern Spanish town of Guernica by Nazi and Italian forces, and was originally used to help raise funds for the Spanish war relief. Measuring 11 feet 5 inches tall and 25 feet wide, the painting, which uses just gray, black, and white, depicts humans and animals in a state of suffering that's been brought on by pain and violence. If you look closely, you'll see various screaming figures, dead people and creatures, and in the forefront a gored horse and a bull. These two animals in particular are important because they're highly regarded characters in Spanish culture and can be seen in a number of his works. Currently on display in Spain's National Museum of 20th Century Art in Madrid, it's easy to get lost in this painting, and the more you look at it, the deeper the meaning that you derive from it becomes. Number 13. My Bed by Tracey Emin. British artist Tracey Emin is known for her controversial works, most of which are described as being autobiographical and confessional. But in 1998, she created a piece that pushed the boundaries between what's actually classified as art, known as My Bed. It's made up of what was once her actual bed, along with various other objects from her bedroom strewn over it. Said to have been inspired by a particularly depressive phase in her life when she spent 4 days in bed with no food, and the only thing she drank was alcohol. She realized that the resulting mess was a powerful message, so decided to encapsulate it as an art installation. Critics were divided when it was first displayed, with many saying that anyone could create a messy bed to put on display. In response to this, she simply pointed out that they didn't, and she was the first person to do this. And no matter what you think of it, there's no doubt that the work made waves in the industry. Incredibly, in July of 2014, My Bed was sold at auction for just over £2.5 million, which is roughly the equivalent of $3.5 million. Number 12. The Means to an End, a shadow drama in 5 acts. Kara Walker is an American artist famed for exploring issues such as race, gender, sexuality, and violence in her works. And while she paints, makes installations, and produces film, it's her paper-cut silhouettes that have resonated the most with the industry. One of the most provocative of these is called The Means to an End, a shadow drama in 5 acts, which is on display at the Chazen Museum in Wisconsin. Created by Walker in 1995, it's made up of 5 panels, each of which depicts a different scene in a story, from the woman with her child on the left to the second where there's a child sat on top of an animal, then a seemingly distressed woman in the third scene, the outline of a head in the fourth, and finally a man in a top hat holding a child in the fifth. These types of silhouette displays were popular during the height of the American slave trade. Walker's choice of images in this piece speak to the helplessness in the face of power dynamics and purposely leave the viewer to interpret each scene in their own way in order to derive their own unique message from the work. It's a powerful and thought-provoking piece and established her as one of the most important artists of our time. Number 11. Sunflower Seeds. Chinese artist Ai Weiwei is known for his political activism against the Chinese government and how he incorporates these views within his sculptures and installations that are displayed around the world. He's not one to hide from controversial subject matters or unusual new techniques, and one of the most famous works of his was called Sunflower Seeds, which went on display at London's Tate Modern Gallery in 2010. Taking up one of the gallery's largest spaces, called the Turbine Hall, the artwork was made up of 100 million porcelain sunflower seeds, each of which had been handcrafted and created a layer on the floor that was 4 inches or 10 centimeters deep. At first, visitors were able to walk over the seeds, run them through their hands, and fully immerse themselves in the artwork, which is meant to symbolize the vastness of China and its uniform order. While up close, you can identify and separate each individual seed, but from a distance, they all blend into one large mass, whereby each individual is lost amongst the millions. Unfortunately, it was later found that the dust that was being released by the seeds could be harmful to breathing, so it was sectioned off and the visitors could only see it from a distance. Since the exhibition ended, the full version of sunflower seeds has never been displayed again, but smaller collections of the seeds have been exhibited in several galleries elsewhere in the world. Number 10. Rabbit. Most highly valuable artworks were created by artists who are long since dead. But the record for the most expensive piece by a living artist goes to Rabbit, which was created by an American artist named Jeff Koons. Made in 1986, he actually forged 3 identical stainless steel sculptures of an almost cartoonish rabbit, perfectly blending the sense of playfulness of childhood, but the sleek reservedness of adulthood. The sculptures are each just a little over 3 feet or 1 meter tall. It would be an understatement to say that critics were divided on the piece, with some loving it and some absolutely hating it. But in many ways, that's exactly what a creative work of art should do. If it emotionally appeals to the viewer, no matter whether that's in a positive or negative way, then it's garnered a better connection than most other things we encounter, and it's because of this that Rabbit has become so famous. 2 of the 3 rabbits were originally sold for about $40,000 each in the 1980s, but with Koons' reputation only improving since then, collectors around the world have clamored for the chance to own the piece that put him on the map. It's for this reason, then, that in 2019, one of the rabbits was sold at auction for an incredible $91 million. Number 9. Fontaines du Bosquet du Théâtre. The Palace of Versailles in Paris, France, is one of the world's greatest examples of opulent architecture, and just as much effort went into landscaping the surrounding grounds as went into designing the building itself. The Water Theatre Grove was a particularly popular feature, having been built between 1671 and 1674, but unfortunately it was destroyed in 1775 and lay in ruins for hundreds of years afterwards. In 2009, however, the management group of the palace decided that it was time to reimagine the garden, and after several years of searching for the right person to oversee this development, they chose artist Jean-Michel Otoniel, who's known for his glass and water sculptures. The result of his work was a simply stunning, curved fountain installation called The Beautiful Dancers, and was based on an image of dancers he had found in a book dating from the 1700s. It's actually made up of 3 separate sculptures that have been submerged within the central pond of the garden, and became the first permanent installation on the ground of the Palace of Versailles since King Louis XVI lived there. Number 8. The Matisse Cutouts. Henri Matisse was a 20th century French artist who was mainly known for being a painter. He was also a sculptor and a printmaker. He became famed for his use of intensely bold colors in his works and helped revolutionize the artistic styles of the early 1900s. But one of the things that made him so great was his ability to adapt to changing circumstances. As he grew older, particularly when he reached his 60s, he became so ill that he was no longer able to paint. For many people, this would be a sign to end their career, but for Matisse, it was a challenge to find another way to express himself, and he began to make cut paper collages. Between 1936 and 1954, he, with the help of his assistants, made at least 120 of these pieces, depicting subjects from snowflowers to circus scenes, dancers, and even a famous snail. Most were surprisingly large in scale, and while they appear to be simple at first, you can't help but be drawn in and appreciate how well framed each one is. Some take up entire rooms, and his two Oceania pieces in particular are full of various animals and plants, all arranged in a way that makes it feel like you've been transported into a silhouette of Tahiti, which is one of the last places Matisse was able to visit before becoming bedbound. Number 7. Helter Skelter 1. American artist Mark Bradford, who's based in Los Angeles, began developing his artistic side relatively late in life, studying at the California Institute of Arts in 1991 at the age of 30. But he soon became internationally renowned for his unique style of abstract paintings, which are a combination of collages and paint, and typically involved household objects too. His most famous work is called Helter Skelter. It was inspired by the apocalyptic race wars that Charles Manson tried to incite in the late 1960s that would shock America. The huge work seems haphazard and chaotic at first glance, but as you take a closer look, you begin to feel the themes of tension that are present throughout. You may spot the skull towards the center of the piece, the S at the top right that represents the Skechers logo, and with a number of words such as candy, king, loud, and best that are hidden within the layered silvered surface. Bradford created a mixed media collage in 2007 as a part of a wider range of pieces, but it was this first helter-skelter image that gripped the art world. In 2018, former owner John McEnroe, the tennis player, put it up for auction, and it was finally sold for almost $12 million, making it by far the most valuable piece by Mark Bradford and shattering the previous record for the highest ever auction price reached for a living African-American artist. Number 6. Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures. David Hockney was one of the foremost contributors to the pop art movement in the 1960s and is regarded by many as one of the most influential British artists of the 20th century. Known for experimenting with a range of different techniques, styles, and media, his works cover a variety of different subjects, but it's his acrylic on canvas painting called Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures that has become his most famous work. Combining two themes that Hockney often visited in his art, a swimming pool and a double portrait, it shows a man swimming underwater in the pool, with his friend, another painter, looking down at him from the side. Set near Saint-Tropez in France, it's a typical example of Hockney's favorite style, with a very simplified background, meaning that the viewer's attention is virtually fully concentrated on the characters in the piece. It took him more than a year and numerous different attempts to perfect this image, and he later said that it was one of his favorite paintings to work on. This joy and dedication in its creation really came through from the finished piece, and it was soon changing hands between collectors, with the price rising each time. In a testament to the artist, the skills and creativity on display, it's now the second most valuable painting by a living artist, having sold in 2018 for just over $90 million. Number 5. Dali, Atomicus. Salvador Dali will always be remembered for spearheading the Surrealist movement, with the Spanish artist combining his technical brilliance with some of the most thought-provoking and creative works ever devised. His focus on bizarre imagery meant that each work he created was truly unique and memorable in its own way, and he loved to try out different media, meaning there are Dali paintings, sculptures, films, and even writings. But some of the most exciting ones were collaborative efforts with other artists. The Atomicus is an example of this, which he created in 1948 with American photographer Philippe Halsman. The image, which is inspired by Dali's painting called Leda Atomica, which can be seen in the right-hand corner, shows a series of objects that are mid-air, including Dali himself, 3 cats, water, an easel, and various pieces of furniture. What seems like a whimsical image actually took a great deal of planning and patience to create. Every subject in it is above the ground, and while some of them were suspended by wire, the water, the cats, and Dali each had to be in the precise position at the time the shutter was snapped. Unsurprisingly, it took a few attempts to get the image that worked, and the final one they chose to publish was actually the 28th image that they captured during the shoot. There's a playful weightlessness to it, and it's the apparent glee on his face that sums up everything he was about. Number 4. Bush Babies. Njideka Akunyili Crosby is a Nigerian artist who now lives in America and has become famed for her stunning collage and photo-based artworks that comment not only on the differences between the two worlds that she's become familiar with, but also the difficulty in blending both. Her pieces typically explore the ideas of post-colonial identity, and she creates huge paper-based works that are made up of family photographs, magazine cuttings, and various other carefully chosen images. There are so many layers and such depth to each one that viewers will always see something new or make new connections and interpretations every time they look at them. and it's this that makes her work so special. The one that's been most popular in the art market is called Bush Babies, and while it doesn't feature any people in as a prominent a role as with her other collages, there's something truly interactive about the way the deeper you look into the bush, the more imagery that's revealed. In 2018, just a year after she made it, Bush Babies sold at auction for $3.4 million, and as she becomes more in demand, it's increasingly difficult to get a hold of one of her works. Because of the time it takes for her to make each one, she only completes a few each year, and there are already reportedly a huge number of institutions that are on the waiting list to have the opportunity to buy their own. Number 3. 1. Number 31, 1950. Jackson Pollock became one of the most famous artists of the 20th century, with his focus on abstract expressionist pieces. His trademark style involved pouring and spraying paint onto a horizontal canvas, which meant that he could work on them and view them from every angle, and in many ways, it's up to the viewer to decide which orientation makes the most sense to them. He once said of this way of creating art that, quote, "I'm more at ease, I feel nearer, more a part of the painting, since this way I can walk around it, work from the four sides and literally be in the painting," end quote. It's almost like he dances around the canvas, and this means that while at first it can be dismissed as being random paint, the closer you look at it and the longer you consider it, the more of a meaning it begins to take on. A great example of his creative style is called 1. Number 31, 1950, which is one of the largest paintings he ever made. Created at the height of his career, it's made up of enamel paint that was layered onto the canvas in a series of different ways, including from a turkey baster. Number 2. Tantanbo. New art styles are continually being developed, and arguably one of the most exciting of the past century is called superflat, a term that was coined by Japanese artist Takashi Murakami. He creates sculptures and paintings which are often described as being a combination of the high and low arts, and by taking traditional Japanese techniques, he tackles modern-day concepts and artistic expectations. He's created several controversial sculptures that have been his most valuable pieces, but the work that sums up his style, with its color and energy, is called Tantanbo. Painted in 2001 and once described as being Murakami's magnum opus, it was painted on a golden canvas and is not only hand-painted but incorporates silk-screened elements as well. The main character, Mr. Daub, is a representation of himself with a beaming black smile, and it's surrounded by the artist's signature motifs like flowers, concentric spirals, and vivid color contrasts. You can also see the super flat elements within the work, which are hyper-compressed and depthless surfaces, whereas other artists may try to create a three-dimensional feel to the image. As a result, there have been criticisms of the artistic merit of Murakami's works. But again, surely the whole point of creative art is to push the boundaries in a way that not everyone will approve of. Number 1. The physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. Damien Hirst burst onto the UK art scene in the early 1990s, and his unique approach to creating artwork immediately thrust him onto the world stage. Known for his highly creative but unconventional installations and works, there's a general theme of death through everything he does, and that's clear to see in what has become his most famous piece, which is called The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. Commissioned in 1991, it features a preserved tiger shark that's suspended in a glass tank full of formaldehyde, and became one of the leading examples of Brit art. Due to the way it was created, the shark actually began to deteriorate soon after it was installed, and the liquid turned murky, so the gallery that owned it was forced to remove the skin, stretch it over a fiberglass frame, and place it back in the tank. Years later, when he heard the piece was to be sold, Hirst offered it to replace the shark with a new one, something that he did at a cost of around $150,000. Now preserved in a way which should avoid the same problem happening again, it's left admirers with the philosophical question of whether it's still even the same artwork anymore, now that it's been so fundamentally changed. What do you think? Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.